Today, I want to address one of the most harmful immigration myths that I tend to continuously hear, which honestly makes me super sad. And so I'm hoping that getting this information out there kind of counteracts some of that bad information and helps people who need it. So it is not uncommon for people who are immigrants married inside the United States to be in an abusive or dangerous relationship and have the fear that they can't end that marriage. They can't, stop living with that person. They can't seek a divorce simply because they're worried about their immigration status. So, how does this misinformation sort of come about? I'm not totally sure, but one thing that I think definitely probably makes it worse is the fact that just based on the dynamics of an abusive relationship, the person who is seeking power over the other partner would tend to use any sort of fear mongering just to leverage some additional power. So it kind of makes sense that perhaps victims in this circumstance are sort of believing the aggressor that that their immigration status really does depend on this other person, that they really are at risk, they really would be deported immediately if they didn't do what the person said, et cetera, et cetera. So there's sort of some power dynamics there. So in terms of what your actual situation would be, if you found yourself in that situation, it depends a lot on the very specific details of what your immigration status is, what your marital status is, and what your spouse's immigration status is. But today we're going to talk about some of the main categories that I tend to see people in. When people come and ask me a question like, can I leave this marriage that I really want to leave, but I'm afraid about my immigration status, about the immigration consequences of doing that. Some of the main advice that I tend to give out. So of course, this is not going to suffice sort of for like as a consultation. But certainly I'm hoping it will give you the information you need to maybe be able to do some more research or find the help that you need. Please also be aware that a lot of domestic violence shelters do have connections with immigration attorneys or nonprofits that can do an assessment for you specifically or help you get the answers to your specific immigration questions. But for now, we'll get some general information out there to get you started. So the first type of scenario, scenario one here that I see frequently is if you are the immigrant and you are married, legally married, either in a different country or in the United States, but you're here in the US and you're legally married to either a US citizen or a green card holder spouse, and your spouse either refuses to apply for immigration benefits for you, like they won't apply for your green card, or maybe they're dragging it out, or maybe they've applied for your green card and then they keep saying, if you don't do this and that, like we're going to cancel this green card application and you're not going to be able to continue. If you're in a scenario like that, there is another law that's called the Violence Against Women Act. And although it's called the Violence Against Women Act, it is gender neutral. So you can use this, if you meet the requirements of this type of case, it doesn't matter if you're a woman who's been the victim of domestic violence, or if you're a man, or if you're non-binary, or if you're in any type of relationship that you would be in, it doesn't matter. You can still use this part of the law. And you can use we'll call it VAWA for short, VAWA for Violence Against Women Act. So VAWA permits the immigrant to self-petition. So, typically in U.S. immigration law, if you're the immigrant family member, you can't make your U.S. citizen or green card holder spouse decide to apply for you under the immigration system. They have to voluntarily participate in themselves. However, in a case where there's abuse, you actually can apply for your own green card yourself. You can start the application. You can complete the application if your spouse says, like, we're going to cancel this thing I started for you, and you're in that scenario, or they're going to abandon it. You could continue it yourself, switch it over to a VAWA self-petition. You can just start it initially if they've never started anything. And one important thing to understand about VAWA is that the application is secret from the spouse. So you could be married, to this person, and you can apply for it yourself. There's a way to do it so that nothing's mailed to your house. They're not contacted. It's completely secret and safe from that person. So that can be a wonderful option if you happen to be in a scenario where you're either currently married to that person, or you've gotten divorced, but it's been less than 2 years. So if you've recently divorced someone and it was based on that on an abusive situation, you'd want to make sure that you get advice sooner rather than later, so you can get that VAWA filed. It's either the deadline for that is either that it's been less than 2 years since you divorced, and it's important that you not remarry into another marriage too before filing that. So just to give you a general idea, but basically VAWA enables you to do everything that you would have done if you'd been in a healthy relationship with that same person and they had applied for you. So you can get your green card, and all of those things, and later become a U.S. citizen and things like that. So that's sort of scenario number one. We can sometimes use VAWA. Another common option that we use for immigrants who've been the victim of domestic violence, specifically in a situation where the immigrant is not married to someone who's a U.S. citizen or a green card holder. Maybe their spouse has a different immigration status or no status at all. But sometimes instead we can use something called a U visa, like the letter U, because a lot of visas have letters. That's just how the system was set up. But a U visa is for certain victims of certain crimes. So there's a list of the types of crimes that you can be a victim of, and receive protection through a U visa. And one of them is domestic violence. So to be able to receive a U visa, you would have to have reported the issue, so called the police or had someone else call the police. Somehow it's came to the attention of the authorities. And you would also have to participate in, how the investigation of it or the prosecution of it. So that looks like if someone calls the police and the police show up, you would have to answer their questions. And then you would need to, say they want to prosecute or press charges against your partner, you would have to, if they ask you to testify or things like that, you would have to do that for the U visa specifically. So that's a difference between, for VAWA, that doesn't matter whether it was ever reported to the police or anything like that. But if we're trying for the U visa option, U visas are better in some ways because you don't have to even be married to a U.S. citizen. But in some ways it's harder because a lot of times with those dynamics, you may not have reported it to the police, or the police may have never been involved in that, or you may have, out of fear or for other reasons, not wanted to participate in the prosecution of that crime. And so that can prevent you from getting a U visa. So I just want to make you aware of that. But a U visa can be a good option if you have involved the authorities and you've kind of cooperated with whatever they've requested in that circumstance. And a U visa doesn't immediately give you a green card, but it does give you the ability to live and work in the U.S. for a period of years. And then later on, you actually can go ahead and apply for a green card as well. So it's, a longer term way to get a similar benefit. So if you qualify for both VAWA and a U visa, we would usually do VAWA because it's a little bit faster and more direct to a green card. But if for some reason you don't have all the requirements for VAWA, then we'll look at a U visa as a possible option as well. Another scenario, moving on to the third scenario, another scenario I see somewhat frequently is someone who they are married to a U.S. citizen or green card holder, and they have actually already received their green card through that marriage. So the person petitioned for them, they went through the process as normal, but this person received a 2-year conditional green card, which is what's given to everyone if they have been married fewer than 2 years at the time they receive the green card. They only get a 2-year card. And then there's an additional step called removal of conditions that you go through right at the 2-year mark of getting the first green card. You have to remove the conditions to be able to get the permanent 10-year green card that's not tied to the marriage. So sometimes during that time period, either before you file removal of conditions at all, or maybe you filed removal of conditions together and then the relationship became abusive or became intolerably abusive and you want to leave. And so, a lot of people will come and ask me, do I have to, they've heard the rumor, which is not true, that you have to stick it out until you get the conditions removed to be able to escape this situation. So, fortunately, that's not true at all. There are actually several different waiver options available for removal of conditions applications. So it's true that the most common way to remove your conditions is that you're still with your partner and you filed jointly together with evidence showing that you still, live together, you're still married, and all those things. There are alternate options on the same form that you can mark. And one of those options is that you have been the victim of domestic violence. And that you were in an abusive relationship. And of course, they're going to ask for a lot of evidence of that and things like that. But basically, you just ask for an alternate way to instead have your conditions removed by yourself, and then it won't involve your partner. Again, it can be done as a secret application where there aren't things coming to your house or things like that. So if you're still in the relationship with a person, or you still have that risk of, worrying about them intercepting your mail or something like that, you can still do it secretly. But basically, it's a way to continue with your own green card status without requiring their assistance for a joint petition. Another thing that's really great about the waivers for removal of conditions is that some of the waiver options actually don't even require you to show domestic violence. So say you are in an abusive relationship, but when we talk about it, we realize there's just not that much actual paperwork that we can show to show how dangerous this is for you. There's actually a different waiver option where you're not casting fault at all. You just basically are saying, I was in I intended for this relationship to work. It was a bona fide relationship and it didn't work out and we got a divorce. And so even for people who there was no abuse in the relationship, it just for whatever reason, the marriage didn't work out, they are still able to get a waiver through that route. So sometimes, that can be helpful. And even in a case where it's an abusive situation, but we can't quite prove that, we can at least still prove that, hey, you intended for the relationship to work out and it didn't. And that can be enough. There's also a basis that has to do with extreme hardship to you if you had to return to your home country. So sometimes, under one of the waivers, we can find a good argument or even argue that multiple waivers would apply to you. So please do not stick it out in a dangerous situation just because you think that you have to remove the conditions on your case. We've had really good success with those as long as they're well documented. So yeah, certainly your safety is number one for that, for sure. And the last major group of sort of inquiries or types of scenarios that I see when people are asking questions about leaving an abusive relationship is when the immigrant is here in the US with an immigrant spouse. So their spouse is not a green card holder. They're not a US citizen. Maybe they're, say on an H-1B or some type of temporary visa where the immigrant spouse that's being abused is a dependent of the visa of the other person. So that can make people feel very vulnerable because they're here in the US and they don't have a way to work independently necessarily. And they aren't sure sort of how to navigate that. So in a situation like that, what we do is we look for other independent immigration options for that dependent spouse. So let's keep using the example of, let's say that the person experiencing the domestic violence is a dependent of a temporary worker. So, we would try different options like, does this person have the skill set themselves to be able to get their own employment-based visa? Or could they go back to school and study and enroll in college and switch over their visa to being a student? Or could they start a business? Or do they have any other family-based options? So we would basically look at everything that exists in the US immigration laws and see if there's anything that can, what would make the most sense and work out best in this person's scenario to switch them to something that doesn't rely on this relationship, so that they can safely, exit that situation and keep their immigration status intact. So my final thoughts on this topic are just that I'm a big believer that your safety is absolutely number one. I'm going to post some places where you can get assistance in the links below, and then certainly a local domestic violence shelter, things like that, could be really helpful to you. I don't believe that anyone should stay in a dangerous situation that they want to leave simply due to their immigration status. I do understand that it's very difficult for people to leave sometimes difficult situations, and that's a decision that only you can make. But I'm definitely hoping that getting some of this information out here helps you have more of the tools to ask the right questions, get the right help, and find a way to keep your immigration status in order while doing the difficult things you want to do to make your life better and keep yourself and even your children as well safe. So hopefully this gets you headed in the right direction, and good luck.